Okay guys, welcome to Mike's Mail episode 5, Cinco. This one, we start out with Sloan is asking me about first aid, or first aid kit. He's going into the backcountry, him and his buddy, and they're going mountaineering, and he wants to know what he should carry or what I carry in my first aid kit. Now, that's an interesting enough question. And the thing is, we could take a look. We'll open up my first aid kit, but I want to consider, you want to consider a couple of things here. Once you've done the first aid, and you've stopped whatever life-threatening bleeds and whatever the problem is as best you can, because there isn't a lot you can do out in the wilderness, right? So soaker bandages and splinting is about it. But what happens after that? And that's what I want to know. I can relate two stories, happened the same place, different times, a couple of weeks apart. The first one was these guys from Washington, very experienced climbers, climbed this Guinness Gully, grade 4, easy grade 4, way above, their skill set is way above that climb. They're coming down, they're just walking. One fella trips and he does it in such a place where he takes a bit of a slide, but they figure he's got a pretty bad spinal injury, and they don't dare move him in case they cause more injury, and then it goes into being quadriplegic. So what happens is the climbers have to get down off of the climb, so they got to go rappel 2 pitches, run to their car 15-20 minutes away, and then drive into town and then phone the wardens. And then in this case they were really lucky because all the park wardens were having a big greet and meet, eat meat. And so they're having a big wild game fest, probably roadkill that they picked up all summer, I don't know. But they were there within a reasonable amount of time, a lot shorter time than they would have been if they had to gather all their resources. And they had to gather a fair amount of resources because by this time it was dark. They get up to the climb, they package the guys, 25 below, he's in his sleeping bag, he's in his, they got to get him off of the climb, and it's a very technical rescue. And by the time they get him down, yeah, it's quite late. And it turns out the guy did. If they figured if they'd have moved him or hadn't taken the amount of care that they did, he would have been a quadriplegic. So it was very fortunate for him. Second story happened 2 weeks later, and it had warmed up a little bit, but the ice was still retaining its radiating cold, and so your crampons were still skating on it a little bit. And I was there with my wife, and she's a park warden, and she insists on always carrying this parks radio, which kind of irritates me sometimes, because I'm kind of the go fast and light type of guy. And I know wouldn't have to carry a pack, we just didn't have to take the brick along. But I also knew that it would be a waste of breath. So anyway, I grabbed my pack, throw the extra gloves and lunch, and the brick is in there. And we wander up behind this 2 couples, and they're on the second pitch. They break into, it's wide enough, and they go into 2 different lines. And and I'm really starting to enjoy the day. I haven't been out in a while. And the next thing you know, not old Jed's Millionaire, this young lady comes flying over the icefall, and by the time the screw catches her, she's down here beside me, and she's taken a good 60 feet, 70 feet of air, and she's cut up pretty bad. Like the picks attached to her had cut her. She's lacerated, broken legs. She's unconscious and sort of making these gurgling sounds, and I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna lose her, man. Like this is really, really bad. Fortunately, Lisa pulls out the brick, and within 20 minutes we get the first flyby, and the next little bit of time is they set down in the valley and then come back up, drop off one public safety warden, and he initiates and checks out the scene. And the second public safety warden is up there with the Bowman bag and the rescue and the vacuum splint, and these guys are in and out of there hot lickety quick. I mean, from the time of the accident started to, I would say, is less than an hour, this girl was in the ambulance and on her way to the hospital. And I guess what I'm trying to communicate is exactly that. Communication with the outside world when you're in a very wilderness setting isn't a bad thing to have, because your other option is just to leave your buddy there and go off on, and a wild animal comes along, might eat him. There might be a lion or a tiger escaped from the zoo, I don't know. But the situation is good. Your options today are more than ever before. I mean, these spot locators aren't very expensive. You can get an account, and sat phones. You can rent a sat phone. You know, if you're going into a place like a glaciated area where you know communication is limited, I would really suggest you research those sort of options. Also, you know, especially here in Canada with the heli-ski areas the way they are, they have repeaters all over the place, and so there isn't very many places. If you have the frequencies to the heli-ski area, then the interior British Columbia is pretty well covered. Any place that you want to go where the skiing is really interesting or the climbing is really interesting. So I would encourage you to consider having some way of communicating with the outside world if you're going someplace where it's going to be fairly remote. Right, so that's just one thing. So right now, let's take a look at what I have inside my first aid kit, and I've got two of them. I've got one for groups, and it's the larger one, and then what I just take to a rock crag, like I'm cragging here today, and I just have a smaller one that's, you know, just going to deal with a bit of stuff because we're not that far from civilization. Well, we're in Canada. I guess we are a long ways from civilization.
Took my love, took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around. And man, I saw my reflection in a snow-covered hill till a landslide brought me down. A mirror in the sky. Can the child within my heart rise above? Can I sail through the changing ocean tides? Can I
Okay, well, as promised, here are my first aid kits. This one I take cragging or just on day hikes or on light mountaineering trips. And this one, you can see, is quite a bit larger, and that's for an extended trip. If I have, you know, like a group of 8 or an extended backpacking trip or anything like that, where, you know, the more people I have, the more likely I'm going to need it, and the more incidences that can occur. So let's start with the small one first. Now, I'm warning you, I am not a first aid expert. I didn't prep these things, so what I have in them is what I have in them, and I already know that I'm missing a couple of things. Oh, maybe not. So when I pull stuff out, essentially, I have these super duper blister packs, right? So what's one of the most common ailments out there? It's blisters. And there's something you got to get on right away, okay? Can't let people just go until the blood's pouring out of their boots. You just let them know. And quite often they'll be self-conscious about it, so they'll try and dodge you and say, oh yeah, I'm doing all fine, and then next thing you know, you got a cripple on your hands and you're not going anywhere. The triangulars, I can't talk too much about triangulars. It seems to be the thing that we use the most. So I would almost suggest, I'm a little short, I only have one here, but having probably 3 minimum. Triangulars we use up left, right, and center. You'll learn in your first aid course. And like I said, you're not sucking me down the first aid drain. I'm not going there. I don't know how to, barely know first aid myself. If you're doing your job right, you hardly ever use first aid. Tape comes in handy for holding the blister patches on, that sort of thing. Number of different uses for it. But when you need tape, nothing quite works as well. Also for splinting fingers together, you know, so if you break the middle finger, you can take the other 2 fingers and splint around it and make a... But you'll learn that in your first aid course also. Here I have an assortment of bandages, like those little knuckles that goes between your knuckles, and just regular bandages. They're the sort of thing that are lightweight, carry, and nothing quite works as well. Well, duct tape works for everything, of course, but I even got little waterproof kid bandages with the helicopters on them. What are the odds of that? Gauze strip, that's for You know, if I put on a big soaker, like somebody gets a big bleed or arterial bleed or something like that, I put a soaker on there, wrap it in gauze, and that'll help hold it in place. And then I take the tape or my triangular and we go down that road. Rubber gloves, because you just don't know this day and age. More rubber gloves, because you really just don't know this day and age. Some iodine and alcohol swabs for cleaning up a wound before you bandage it. If you're out for a number of days, somebody, you know, you get scrapes on your knees or cuts or abrasions, and just cleaning it up a little bit before you put a bandage on it and let it heal is the way to go. And then on the other side here, we're coming down to the end already. I have a elastic tensor, and nothing quite works as well as this one, our elastic tensor, for a lot of applications. This one's a little old, needs replacing. Thank you guys for getting me out and checking this stuff. Sterile bandages, or not bandages, but gauze or pads that go on the skin layer, and then you can wrap whatever you want over top of that. But remember, you'll learn in your first aid course, you want to keep things as clean as possible. And then I always carry one of these. This is a big pressure bandage, because that's the one thing that, you know, you have to deal with in the woods that is going to cause you problems, and be a major problem. If you haven't got something that'll soak up the blood and then just keep pressurizing, keep that pressure on it all the time, you're in a bit of trouble. But having a good pressure bandage is, well, could be life and death. And we're coming down. Here's the other things that I carry. You know, I'm fanatical about having waterproof matches and a fire starter, because if I'm out there and I'm told hungry and exhausted, and I'm got to the point that I need to light a fire in a national park where it's illegal and I don't break the law easy, well, as long as nobody's around, I probably could, but I want to be able to light a fire. And you know, there's nothing quite brings comfort level like a good fire. And then I have a little set of tweezers here for pulling out wounds and rocks and abrasions and things like that. And literally, that's all I have. It's empty now. See, and I just carry it in this little package. One of my cohorts says, just throw it in a plastic bag and save the weight of the package. Yeah, but this looks so much more official. It's got the little Mountain Equipment Co-op thing on it, and it's got a little red cross. So people just start feeling better when you see that. Now, you want to look official. This one actually says first aid on it. Now, this one, I got a little bit more stuff in it, right? Because we're going on an extended trip. And look at that puppy, eh? I always kind of find these pockets that they build in here fairly useless. What's different in here is I'll carry these oral flange airways setups. Now, remember we talked about communications? You pull out and start using these puppies, you better have a radio or a telephone or something, I'll tell you. Because if you don't, she's going to be all over but the crying in a little while. Carry a couple of these strips or gauze strips in here. I have, once again, these are sterile, clean, new bandages that go right against the skin, and then you can wrap them up after that. I carry 2 or 3 of these. Keep them all nice and clean. Bigger, wider gauze bandage. Rubber gloves, you know why? Because you guys are so filthy out there. Procreating and all that sort of thing. More rubber gloves, lots of rubber gloves there. Good selection of bandages, knuckle bandages, wrap, things that are wrapped in between your fingers. Standard bandages. I use these all, well, I don't use them all, but they sure are handy. And that's the most common thing that you're going to use in this entire thing, next to your blister kit. And you know what? I don't have one in here, so thanks to you guys, I'm going to be all packed up here by the end of the day and have a brand new blister kit. Now we're opening up the main package of this. You can see I carry 1, 2, 3 triangular bandages in here. I think they're pretty handy. And lo and behold, I have 2 SAM splints. Now I might be going a little overboard on the SAM splints here. I could probably get rid of one of these. But nothing quite works as well as a SAM splint, you know, for an ankle stirrup splint or a sugar tong arm splint or a double layer wrist splint. These things will stabilize an injury quite well, and you'll be able to transport your buddy, your partner, or client back to the real world in about as much comfort as you can provide. And then the only other thing I carry in here, I carry some tape. I carry 2 different kinds, a cloth and a real sticky 3M tape. And duct tape, if you have it, will do probably the same thing, so you know you can cover it. But this, and a pencil, of course, to write down my winning lottery ticket numbers, which have never worked. Keep buying those losing ones. And that's just about it. So what I'm missing in here is just the blister kit, and that's about all. I mean, so you know what? And there really isn't much to these first aid kits. All you have to do is like, we go out to the thing and just buy a few supplies, figure out what you need. I see the store-bought ones. I mean, Canadian Tire and those places, they sell you the whole kit, and it's, you know, it looks all nice and official, but for 3 times the price of what you would pay if you just walked into the drugstore and picked out the exact same things that they have in the kit, and then just put it in a plastic bag and then threw it in the top of your pack, and you're good to go. So don't get carried away by the fancy packaging. And like somebody once said to me, you know, if you're in this game long enough, sooner or later you're going to be a first responder to an accident. And I just kind of chucked it off when I heard it, but sure enough it happens. So anyhow, that's about all I'm going to talk about first aid kits, you guys. Remember, need to light a fire. There, done. How was that?
2 things I'd add.
What's that? Okay, well, I put this away. The one other thing I'd like to add there, folks, is that about drugs, or pharmaceuticals as they are known. You can Tylenol, ibuprofen, over-the-counter stuff is easy to get your hands on. Anything more powerful, that's totally up to you. I'm not recommending it, but I did have a friend who popped a couple Percocet with a badly broken ankle not that long ago. But you have to be warned about that. There's contraindicators and stuff and other drugs that can't be mixed with, and you never know what the doctor is going to do or want to do. So maybe best to stay away from that unless you really know what you're doing, or you're climbing with a paramedic or something. The other thing is having a cheat sheet. So things that are going on with the patient, you know, pulse rate, breathing, pale, cool, clammy skin, all those sort of things that you get off your first aid course, all the things that you're supposed to watch for. Well, maybe having those written down, so that having a pen and paper there so that you can record these things and pass them on to the next medical professional. And that'll mean a lot to them. So they can find out whether your patient or victim is getting better, getting worse, or staying the same. And that's important information over time to a medical professional. Alrighty, well, that's all I got for you.
I picked it out on the piano, but it was years later that I found out or learned that it was actually the song Let It Be by the Beatles, so that was pretty neat.
Beatles. McBeatles.
like John Lennon's probably going, that's bloody cool.
Boy, we don't need any more of that, do we? That was different. So tying into the harness, there was that little point where, this is what I do sometimes. I don't do it very often, but I have done it in the past. Then if I don't do this, what I have done in the past is I've just rethreaded the tail so it's out of the way, back through the figure of 8, if you can see here, right? Through itself, and then, so there, it just comes back at me and it's out of the way and makes it all nice and clean coming out. But what I found out in this, or what I read in this newsletter, and they have this concern in Europe, is if you were to clip in here and then clip to a bolt to rest, and I can see it happening now, is the figure 8 doesn't bite on itself and it's trying to flip over, like it doesn't tighten up when it's being pulled. So, you know, that's something, and I just saw a fellow doing that down the road here. No, not hanging off of it, but just rethreaded it. So, and I have done it, I have to admit, doing it in the past. So it's something to consider if I were to, you know, clip into a bolt and hang off of that, is that possibly could flip over. So just to sort of demonstrate, this is where I've rethreaded it and flipped it back on itself. And now that I look at it, I can see how that could happen. What I want to stress, I guess, for one thing, as a general rule, you probably want to clip the hard point of your harness and then clip the bolt if you're going to hang and rest or something. Probably is not a good idea to clip this point right in here. But you can see how it's trying to flip over on itself already. And if you sat down on that, I mean, you could easily see how that would flip over. And I'm just doing this with my fingers. That's not even body weight. See, that flipped over again, and then it just keeps going. And the next thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire because he's collecting insurance on your dead body. So, you know what? Don't do that. I'm not going to do it anymore, and if I'm not going to do it, you shouldn't do it, right? So let's tie it off the way we're supposed to tie it off, and that would be just an overhand over the end, and you know, you're just cleaning the knot up anyhow, right? So it's that way, and let's just put a overhand knot or fisherman, half a fisherman's, or whatever you want to call it, sort of thing. And this isn't structurally part of the knot itself, it's just cleaning it up. If you do your figure 8 right, that's the knot. That's the thing that's going to hold you together.
Why don't you just not be so sloppy and have less of a tail, just so a hand length, and just learn to do it?
You know what? We've got a pretty broad audience, so there's different skill sets out there, okay?
Just
so
start to be perfect.
Start to be perfect. Okay, the peanut gallery's here, guys.